The morning sun cast long shadows across the White House rose garden as staffers hurried to set up folding chairs and arrange colorful banners. President Trump's schedule showed a simple 30-minute photo opportunity with local schoolchildren, nothing more than handshakes, smiles, and the usual pleasantries that would make for good evening news footage. Sarah Matthews, the White House press secretary, briefed the president as he adjusted his tie in the Oval Office. "It's just a standard Education Week event, Mr. President. 68 children from 5 D.C. elementary schools. Quick photos, maybe take a few questions about reading or math homework, and you'll be done in time for your 11 a.m. economic briefing." Trump nodded, already mentally rehearsing his talking points about American education and the importance of learning. These events had become routine, predictable moments designed to show a softer, more relatable side of the presidency. The White House Rose Garden was bustling with activity as President Trump prepared for what was supposed to be a routine photo opportunity with local schoolchildren. The event was part of National Education Week, and dozens of young students from Washington, D.C. elementary schools had been invited to meet the president. Among the crowd of excited children stood 8-year-old Maya Chen, a third grader from Lincoln Elementary. Her black hair was neatly braided with small yellow ribbons that matched her school uniform, but her serious expression set her apart from her giggling classmates. While other children waved enthusiastically at the cameras and whispered excitedly about meeting the president, Maya clutched a crumpled piece of paper in her small hands, her brow furrowed in concentration. Maya's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had noticed her student's unusual quiet demeanor during the bus ride to the White House. "Are you nervous, Maya?" she had asked. But Maya had simply shaken her head and continued staring out the window, lost in thought. The truth was, Maya had been thinking about this moment for weeks. Ever since her class had learned they would visit the president, she had been formulating a plan. It wasn't born from political awareness. At 8 years old, Maya barely understood the complexities of government. Instead, it came from something much simpler and more profound, a question that had been keeping her awake at night. 2 weeks earlier, Maya had been walking home from school when she passed by the community center where a food bank operated every Tuesday afternoon. Through the large windows, she could see families lined up with empty bags and tired expressions. Among them was Tommy Rodriguez from her class, a boy who always seemed hungry and rarely had lunch money. That night at dinner, Maya had asked her parents why some people didn't have enough food. Her mother, Dr. Lisa Chen, a pediatrician at Children's Hospital, had tried to explain in terms an 8-year-old could understand. Her father, David Chen, who worked as an engineer, had added that sometimes it wasn't about there not being enough food in the world, but about how it was shared. "It's like when we order pizza for your birthday party," her mother had said gently. "There's usually enough for everyone, but sometimes the slices don't get distributed fairly." That simple analogy had stuck with Maya, growing into something much larger in her young mind. She began noticing things she had never paid attention to before. The kids at school who never bought lunch, the homeless man who sat outside the grocery store, the way her own full refrigerator contrasted with the empty shelves she glimpsed in some of her classmates' homes. "Mr. President," Maya called out suddenly, her clear voice cutting through the chatter as Trump bent down to shake hands with the children. The president was in his element, working the crowd with practiced ease, commenting on colorful drawings the children had made and complimenting their neat school uniforms. "I have a math problem that nobody can solve. Not my teacher, not my parents, not even my big brother Kevin, who's in high school and is really good at algebra." Mrs. Rodriguez felt her stomach drop. Maya was a bright student, but she could be unexpectedly direct, a trait that had led to some memorable parent-teacher conferences. The teacher stepped forward, ready to gently redirect the conversation, but President Trump was already intrigued. The president paused, his attention fully captured. Around them, the rose garden seemed to hold its breath. Secret Service agents remained alert but unmoving. The press pool, initially chattering among themselves, suddenly focused their cameras and microphones on the small girl. Even veteran White House correspondent Jake Morrison, who had covered 3 presidencies, found himself leaning forward with genuine curiosity. "Well, let's hear it, sweetheart," Trump said, his voice carrying that familiar, confident tone that had become his signature. He straightened his tie and smiled broadly for the cameras. "I was very good at math, you know, the best at math, some people say. I went to Wharton. That's a very good school for numbers." Maya unfolded her paper with trembling fingers. The sheet was wrinkled from being carried in her backpack for days, and her careful third-grade handwriting was visible in blue ink. She had practiced this moment dozens of times in front of her bedroom mirror, but now, standing before the President of the United States, with cameras rolling and adults watching, her voice felt small. She cleared her throat and spoke louder than she felt. "If you have a pizza cut into 8 slices and you eat 3 slices, what fraction of the pizza is left?" The crowd of adults chuckled softly, a collective sound of relief and amusement. This was exactly the kind of innocent, manageable question they had hoped for. Even the president smiled broadly, clearly thinking this would be an easy win that would make for great publicity photos. Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, standing just behind the president, allowed himself a small smile. This was going perfectly, much better than some of the more unpredictable public events they had navigated. "Well, that's simple," Trump declared, his voice projecting confidence as he gestured with his hands. "You'd have 5 slices left out of 8, so that's 5/8 of the pizza remaining. See, I told you I was good at math." He winked at the cameras, and several adults applauded politely. But Maya shook her head firmly, her yellow ribbons swaying with the motion. "That's what everyone says, but that's not the real answer." The president's confident smile faltered slightly. Around the Rose Garden, the atmosphere shifted almost imperceptibly. Mrs. Rodriguez felt her heart rate quicken. Sarah Matthews, monitoring from the sidelines, subtly signaled to the cameraman, wondering if they should wrap up this segment early. Trump's eyebrows raised, and for a moment, the famous deal-maker who had negotiated with world leaders found himself genuinely puzzled by an 8-year-old girl. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" Maya took a deep breath, and in that moment, something remarkable happened. Her nervousness seemed to evaporate, replaced by the kind of clarity that sometimes comes to children when they speak from their hearts rather than their heads. Her voice grew stronger, more confident. "My question isn't really about math, Mr. President. It's about sharing." She glanced down at her paper, then back up at him with steady, serious eyes. "See, when you eat 3 slices and there are 5 left, what matters isn't the fraction. What matters is, are you going to eat all 5 remaining slices by yourself, or are you going to share them with people who are hungry?" The Rose Garden fell completely silent. The only sounds were the distant hum of traffic beyond the White House gates and the soft whir of camera motors. Even the seasoned reporters stopped scribbling in their notepads, their pens suspended mid-sentence. Jake Morrison, who had covered everything from natural disasters to international summits, would later tell colleagues that he had never witnessed such a profound moment of stillness in all his years of political journalism. Secret Service agent Patricia Williams, stationed near the rose bushes, found herself fighting back unexpected tears. She had 2 young children at home and recognized the pure honesty in Maya's voice, the kind of truth that adults often lose the ability to speak. Maya continued, her 8-year-old wisdom shining through with startling clarity. "Because if you keep all 5 slices for yourself when there are hungry people around, then really you have everything and they have nothing. But if you share 4 slices with others and keep just 1 for yourself, then everyone has something." She paused, looking directly into the president's eyes with the fearless honesty that only children possess. "So the real answer isn't 5/8. The real answer is How much are you willing to share? Mrs. Rodriguez stood frozen, equally proud and terrified of her student. This was not the safe, predictable school visit anyone had planned for. Mart Meadows felt his carefully orchestrated schedule crumbling, but found himself unable to intervene. Something about the child's sincerity had created a bubble of authenticity that felt too precious to break. In the press pool, CNN's senior correspondent Maria Santos was frantically typing notes on her phone, recognizing that she was witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't political theater or campaign messaging. This was a genuine human moment unfolding in real time. President Trump stared at the little girl for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 30 seconds. Those who knew him well, his staff, his family, the reporters who had covered him for years, had rarely seen him truly speechless. The usual quick responses and confident quips that had defined his public persona seemed to have abandoned him entirely. For a moment, the most powerful man in the world was simply a person, standing in a garden, confronted by a truth so simple and profound that it cut through every layer of political calculation and media strategy. Maya waited patiently, her small hands now clasped behind her back, her head tilted slightly as she watched the president process her words. She wasn't trying to embarrass him or make a political statement. She was simply waiting for an answer to what she considered a very important question. Finally, Trump knelt down slowly, his expensive suit creasing as he lowered himself to Maya's eye level. When he spoke, his voice was unusually quiet, stripped of its typical bravado and showmanship. "You know what, Maya?" He paused, seeming to search for words that didn't come from any speechwriter or campaign consultant. "You just taught me something I never learned in any business school." He glanced around at the crowd of reporters, officials, teachers, and children watching intently, all of them sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. The cameras continued rolling, but somehow the mechanical clicking and electronic buzzing seemed less intrusive, less important than the human moment unfolding. Sometimes the most powerful man in the world was simply a person, standing in a garden, confronted by a truth so simple and profound that it cut through every layer of political calculation and media strategy. Maya waited patiently, her small hands now clasped behind her back, her head tilted slightly as she watched the president process her words. She wasn't trying to embarrass him or make a political statement. She was simply waiting for an answer to what she considered a very important question. Finally, Trump knelt down slowly, his expensive suit creasing as he lowered himself to Maya's eye level. When he spoke, his voice was unusually quiet, stripped of its typical bravado and showmanship. "You know what, Maya?" He paused, seeming to search for words that didn't come from any speechwriter or campaign consultant. "You just taught me something I never learned in any business school." He glanced around at the crowd of reporters, officials, teachers, and children watching intently, all of them sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. The cameras continued rolling, but somehow the mechanical clicking and electronic buzzing seemed less intrusive, less important than the human moment unfolding. Sometimes the most important questions aren't about what we have left for ourselves, but about what we're willing to give to others. He stood up slowly, his movements deliberate and thoughtful in a way that surprised everyone present. When he addressed the gathering again, it wasn't with his usual theatrical gestures or campaign rally energy. Instead, he spoke with a quieter intensity that commanded attention through sincerity rather than volume. "This young lady has reminded me that leadership isn't about keeping the biggest slice. It's about making sure everyone gets fed." He looked down at Maya, who was beaming with the satisfaction of someone whose important message had been heard and understood. The president then did something that surprised everyone present, including his own staff. He turned to Mark Meadows, his chief of staff, who was standing with a clipboard and the careful expression of someone trying to manage an unscripted moment. "Mark, I want you to schedule a meeting with the Secretary of Agriculture first thing tomorrow morning, and get me the head of the school nutrition program on the phone this afternoon." His voice carried a decisiveness that his staff recognized, but applied now to something entirely unexpected. "I want to expand the school lunch program," he continued, his words carrying across the rose garden with growing conviction. "If we're going to talk about sharing pizza, let's make sure every child in America has lunch. Not just the reduced price program we have now. I'm talking about universal free lunches. Every child, every school, no questions asked." Sarah Matthews felt her carefully planned press briefing notes becoming completely obsolete. This was not in any talking points memo. "Furthermore," the president continued, warming to his theme in a way that reminded observers of his business background, "I want to establish a national food sharing initiative. If Maya here can understand that the real question isn't about fractions, but about caring for others, then we can figure out how to get surplus food from places that have too much to places that don't have enough." Maya beamed, her mission accomplished, but she wasn't quite finished. With the fearless persistence that only children possess, she reached into her pocket and pulled out something else, a small folded piece of paper, different from the one with her math question. "Mr. President," she said, her voice clear and confident now, "I wrote you a letter too." Trump accepted the small piece of paper, unfolding it carefully. Written in Maya's neat third-grade handwriting, with a few spelling mistakes that somehow made it more endearing, was a simple message. "Dear Mr. President, my mom says you make important decisions for everyone in America. I think the most important decision is always, how can we help people who need help? My teacher says that's what heroes do. I hope you will be a hero. Your friend, Maya Chen. P.S. The best leaders are the ones who make sure nobody goes hungry." As Trump read the letter aloud to the assembled crowd, something remarkable happened throughout the Rose Garden. Hardened political reporters found themselves wiping their eyes. Secret Service agents, trained to remain impassive, allowed small smiles to cross their faces. Mrs. Rodriguez openly wept with pride for her student. But perhaps most remarkably, the other children, who had been watching this entire exchange with the fascination that kids show when one of their peers captures adult attention, began to step forward. Suddenly, hands were shooting up throughout the small crowd of students. "Mr. President," called out Tommy Rodriguez, the boy Maya had seen at the food bank, "I have a question too." "So do I," added Sarah Kim from Jefferson Elementary. "Me too," shouted Marcus Washington from Roosevelt Primary. What had begun as a simple photo opportunity was transforming into something unprecedented, a genuine town hall meeting with 8-year-olds asking the leader of the free world about fairness, kindness, and what it means to care for others. The president, completely abandoning his original schedule, spent the next hour answering questions from children. They asked about homelessness. Why don't people have houses? About inequality. Why do some kids have lots of toys and others don't have any? And about kindness. How can we make mean people nice? With each question, Trump found himself giving increasingly thoughtful, honest answers. Not the political non-answers that had become second nature, but genuine responses to genuine concerns. The children's sincerity seemed to unlock something in him that years of political combat had buried. Finally, as the extended event wound down and the children prepared to return to their schools, Maya approached the president one more time. "Mr. President," she said quietly, "will you really help make sure kids don't go hungry?" Trump knelt down once more, taking her small hands in his larger ones. "Maya, I give you my word. And you know what? I'm going to need your help." "My help?" Maya's eyes widened. "That's right. I'm going to make you my official advisor on making sure we share our pizza fairly. What do you say? Will you help me remember what's really important?" Maya nodded solemnly, understanding that she was being entrusted with something significant. As the buses pulled away from the White House, carrying 68 elementary school students back to their regular lives, the adults left behind in the Rose Garden stood in stunned silence. They had just witnessed something none of them had expected, a genuine moment of human connection that transcended politics, age, and position. That evening, as news of the encounter spread across social media and television networks, political commentators struggled to analyze what they had witnessed. The hashtag #PizzaMath began trending worldwide, with thousands of people sharing their own thoughts about sharing and leadership. But the real impact was just beginning. Within a week, President Trump had indeed met with the Secretary of Agriculture and the head of the school nutrition program. The meetings, which staff expected to be brief courtesy calls, stretched for hours as the president insisted on understanding every detail of childhood hunger in America. The statistics were sobering. Over 11 million children in the United States experienced food insecurity. Many relied on school meals as their primary source of nutrition, going hungry on weekends and during school breaks. The existing programs, while helpful, were bogged down in bureaucracy and means testing that often left the most vulnerable children without access. "This is unacceptable," Trump declared during one cabinet meeting, Maya's letter prominently displayed on the table before him. "We're the wealthiest nation in human history, and we have children going to bed hungry. That ends now." The president's sudden passion for child nutrition surprised many in Washington, but those who witnessed the Rose Garden encounter understood its origin. Maya Chen had planted a seed that was now growing into comprehensive policy. 3 months later, the Maya Initiative was signed into law, a bipartisan bill that provided universal free breakfast and lunch to every public school student in America, regardless of family income. The program also established community food distribution centers and expanded summer feeding programs. But the story didn't end there. Maya, true to her appointment as official advisor, began visiting the White House once a month. These weren't photo opportunities. They were working meetings where she would report on what she observed in her school and community, always with suggestions for how to help more people. "Mr. President," she said during one visit, "I noticed that the janitor at our school, Mr. Martinez, sometimes doesn't eat lunch because he says food is too expensive. Can we help grown-ups too?" That observation led to the expansion of the program to include all school employees, custodians, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, and teachers, ensuring that everyone in the school community had access to nutritious meals. Maya's influence extended beyond policy. She began speaking at schools across the country, sharing her pizza math question and encouraging other children to think about sharing and kindness. Her simple message resonated. The real question isn't what's left for me, but how can we make sure everyone has enough?